or something. It's going to read differently, but that's okay. And so here's how it starts. If you love sleep, you will end in poverty. Already? One verse. Uh-oh, I think I got some slides out of order here. I think this is a end slide. Okay, if you love sleep, you will end in poverty. Keep your eyes open, and there will be plenty to eat. The buyer haggles over the price, saying it's worthless, and afterwards brags about getting a bargain. Wise words are more valuable than much gold and many rubies. Get security from someone who guarantees a stranger's debt. Get a deposit if he does it for foreigners. Stolen, and that's going to be an interesting discussion there. Stolen bread tastes sweet, but it turns to gravel in the mouth. Plans succeed through good counsel. Don't go to war without wise advice. A gossip goes around telling secrets, so don't hang with chatterers. If you insult your father and mother, your light will be snuffed out in total darkness. I like that one, right? We need to read that one in the back several times. An inheritance obtained too early in life is not a blessing in the end. Okay, so these verses are dealing with morality or moral character, okay? And so as we've gone through them, right, and like I said last week, we were actually talking about integrity. Now we're talking about morals. So what's the difference? And like Charlie asked a question last week, so I had to jump.
Yeah, that's Bo.
Is that Bo?
That's Bo.
Yes.
Oh man, I'm surprised to see you. Bow season is open. I figured you'd be hiding.
That's why he grew the.
Oh, that's why he's grown the beard. He's incognito.
Yeah.
He thinks I look like Bocephus. Nobody will know, right? It's good to see you, Bo. All right, so integrity, okay? A firm adherence or stick-to-itiveness to a code of especially moral or artistic values. In other words, I stick to... Now, integrity in and of itself is not a moral thing. You can have, quote, integrity, if you stick to do unto them before they do unto me type of thing, right? And if you always do that, you have integrity in that regard. Now, we have a tendency to consider it only when sticking to the positive side, okay? But integrity is firm adherence to a code, especially moral or artistic values. It's incorruptibility. In other words, I don't ever separate from the code that I follow. It's an unimpaired condition, soundness. In other words, I'm always here. I'm always doing this. And the quality of state of being complete or undivided. Okay? I don't split my time. I'm not sometimes following this code, sometimes following that code. I stick with one. That's integrity. Okay? But morals or morality is very simply recognizing right and wrong. That's morals. Morals is recognizing the difference between right and wrong. And integrity is sticking to, for instance, always doing the right thing, right? So morals tells us what the right thing is. Integrity means we always do the right thing, okay? The difference between them is knowing and doing, or doing all the time. So I was we were doing some training here several years ago, and so they were trying to identify for us or help us identify within ourselves certain characteristics. And so they asked this question. And of course they said, don't anybody leap up with the answer, because this is a little bit telling on you psychologically. So you're in a desert, on a highway, in a car, on a highway, flying down the road, and you're coming up on a four-way intersection. And you're in a desert, so you can see for miles in any direction. Okay? Miles and miles. You have a stop sign facing you coming up on the intersection. And there is nobody. Nobody. You are the only one within miles of your location. Do you stop?
Yes.
Yes.
Right? So do you stop? Now, you'd be surprised how many people would go, well, no.
My mother-in-law would say, "No cop, don't stop."
Right.
That's how she taught my children.
Because why? I'm there to stop to allow cross traffic. I could see for miles and miles upon miles and miles, and there is no cross traffic. I do not need to stop. That's what's known as a conditional code, right? You're a moral person, or you follow the rules, and that's where this was going. It really didn't. Nobody's going to go to hell for running a stop sign. I'm just saying, okay. But you follow the rules only when it makes sense to follow the rules, right? Only when there's a reason to follow the rules. Now, there was one guy, and there's always one in the class. When you ask that question, hand goes up, and there's always one person in class goes, "Is there a cop hiding anywhere?" Okay. So now let's change the conditions of the test. Same intersection, same desert, same car, same you. Only now you have a child in the car and a hospital on the other side of the intersection. No cars. You could see for miles and miles, but you have to get that child to the emergency room in that hospital. And you're facing a stop sign. No cars. Do you run the stop sign?
Yep.
Yep.
Been there,
Yes.
done that.
Yep.
So, see,
I'm going to slow to clear the intersection, then I'm
Well,
going
yeah,
to proceed.
Okay.
California.
So
that's called running
this
the
is
stop
what's,
sign.
yeah, it's called running the stop sign. This is what we
I
call,
didn't say it wasn't. I'm going to slow down and clear the intersection.
this is what we call somebody who deludes themselves.
No, that's my cop training.
So the difference is, see, most of us have in our psyche this situational, what they call situational ethics, right? We follow the rules, but there are times when we are not going to follow the rules. Now, some people just don't follow the rules, right? I know why that rule is there. This is me. I'll just let y'all know. I know why that rule is there. I know what it's intended to keep me from doing. I can see that those conditions do not exist. I do not need to follow this rule. Okay? I inherited it honestly from my dad. Okay? And I'm the same way. But there are people who say, no, you always stop at the stop sign. Put a sick kid in the car and a hospital on the other side, and no, just blow through the stop sign. Okay? So what we're talking about here, the difference between them, is knowing the difference between right and wrong morally. I'm using the stop sign as a fun example, right? But there are times when, okay, I'm hungry, should I steal this apple? Because I'm hungry, right? So this is the same kind of thing, right? There's a stop sign. The stop sign is, thou shalt not steal. The sick kid in the car is, I'm very, very hungry, right? So do I run the stop sign? So this is where, so integrity, if you're a moral person, it's wrong to steal. I do not do the wrong thing. My integrity says I never do the wrong thing. I always do the right thing. So if I have strong integrity, strong moral code teaches me right and wrong. A strong integrity says, I don't care if I'm starving to death, I'm not stealing the apple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the shopkeeper, can I sweep out the floor for an apple? Right? And then when he chases me off with the broom, I'm going to steal apple on my way out. No. You don't do that, okay? But, yeah, nowadays they have cameras, right, to be after you. So but the point is, that's the difference between integrity and morals or morality, right? Is everybody? Somebody nod. Somebody nod off. I mean, give me something. Okay. All right. So
Here's a question.
okay, go ahead.
Is it immoral to kill? To kill. Is it immoral to kill?
You're not asking me. I know the answer.
No, it's immoral to murder.
So what do you think? Is it immoral to kill?
No.
Yeah, we're talking people.
What's the situation?
It depends on the situation. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
War.
Oh, yeah.
So the answer to that question is not as straightforward as it seems.
That's exactly right.
Okay. It is quite obvious that there's a difference, slight though it might be, between murder and killing. Okay. So murder is the intentional cause of death in someone else for your own purposes. Right? Are y'all with me? So I'm going to cause your death for my purposes, for what I want. That's why Cain killed Abel, right? It started a whole chain reaction that hasn't ended yet. Okay? But what about self-defense of my family? What about when I go home, right? And I'm in my own home and someone kicks the door down and comes into the house. Now, there are certain religious sects in this country and elsewhere in the world who would be, well, I cannot lift a hand. You do what you will to me and my family, but I cannot lift a hand to stop you, right? We don't see that principle taught or written in Scripture anywhere, okay? So one is allowed to defend one's family up to and including the ultimate use of force in defense of one's family. And there is dispensation. Now, I'm not saying that when we get to heaven, God will go, I think he'll look at us and go, I'm sorry that you had to kill one of my other children, right? This breaks God's heart that we're killing each other, right? But there is no guilt or condemnation assigned to the act when it is along those lines. When I am protecting or defending, okay? I'm not doing anything for my own purposes, right? I haven't started the chain of events. I'm not coveting, hating, anything like that. I'm reacting to someone else's implied will. So does that make sense? Do we like that answer? Do we want another one? I don't have another one. So if you want another one, you have to go somewhere else, because that's the way I see it coming out of Scripture. Okay? So let's back up. Let me say this too as well. That is the best solution we can hope for or come to in this broken world. In God's perfect design, there's no killing ever for any reason. But once the wheels came off, the lines had to be drawn, and
sin entered, death accompanied.
Death accompanied, right? And so in God's purposes, there's no reason to kill ever, but there's no reason anyone should ever give you to have to kill them either, right? And so we're given. I'll put it to you this way: when they tried to corner Jesus with the whole divorce issue, right? And they said, Moses gave us divorce. And Jesus said, Moses gave you divorce out of the hardness of your hearts because you refused or could not forgive sin in the spouse, right? And so Jesus was telling them that divorce was a very disliked situation in God's eyes. He did not want that. However, in this fallen world, right, sometimes an accommodation had to be made. Now, if you ask me about divorce, what I'm going to tell you is there needs to be dire circumstances involved because that is not God's will. And when you even when there are, let's say, justifiable situations, there is still damage done to the heart and the soul. Now, that's not to say that God can't overcome that. He can overcome anything, but it still needs to be reckoned with. So, questions? Are we good? I mean, y'all not throwing nothing, so it must be okay, right? Okay. Some of these questions like this, we were never intended to have to answer. And the only reason we have to grapple with them is because we've created untenable situations, right? We've created these kinds of things. So we have to deal with those kinds of problems. Okay. So, so our very first verse, now that we've talked about that, we understand what the difference is in our integrity and morals. And what we're going to do now is we're looking at the rights and the wrongs, right? In the first set of verses, did I miss one? I put that in there for people to catch. Did you catch one? See me after class, you'll get a prize. Okay. So the very first verse deals with sleep, but not probably in the way we're thinking about, because it isn't the amount of sleep that it's talking about. And the verse is, if you love sleep, you will end in poverty. Keep your eyes open. It isn't the amount of sleep, but the importance of it, right? So those people who choose to sleep rather than do anything else. Now, I'm not talking about getting a good night's sleep. I'm not talking about, neither is the writer here. We're not talking about sleeping and being late to somewhere, right?
That's right.
So, but what we're talking about is excessive amounts of sleep. Sleep becomes a priority, right? Well, I can't do this. I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to sleep. And so what he talks about here is to keep your eyes open. There will be plenty to eat. So those who love sleep is needed. Sleep is required, right? It's the way we're built. But he's talking about people who love to sleep, right? Go to bed at 10, sleep till noon. Yeah, this is. If you have small children, that's just not going to happen. But opportunities sometimes will come to us when we'd rather be sleeping. Now, you can also extend this, right? And that's why I say otherwise occupied. Anything that preoccupies you inordinately to some huge degree, right? I know guys, their hobby is fishing. And you can't get a word out of them that isn't something about fishing. And it's the latest lures, the latest boats, the latest rods, the latest reels.
You could have went with hunting, then it would have been faster.
He stands in the pulpit every Sunday, and you think I'm going after him?
Smart man.
I've been studying Proverbs for quite some time. I know where wisdom is. It's anything that gets in the way of your relationship with God, right? Or gets in the way of taking care of your family. That's where this is going. And then it talks about, opportunities. That's what it means. Keep your eyes open. There will be plenty to eat. Have you ever noticed, and this always got me, right? People people, and they did when I was growing up, they did a whole thing, 60 Minutes, back when 60 Minutes was a really eye-opening program to be watching. They did a whole series, right? They camped out outside a welfare office to see people coming in to get welfare checks. And the reason they were doing it is because about every second or third person coming in to get a welfare check was driving a brand new fancy type car. Cadillac, sports cars, you know. And I've seen, you know these people, right? They live in an absolute wreck of a house, and they're driving, well, what today would be a $70 or $80 or $90,000 automobile. I mean, they got fancy cars, but they got holes in their shoes. Or they got great clothes, but no food on the table. And for myself, I learned a long time ago, because I was not a rich person, and so I couldn't afford a mechanic. I had to learn how to work on cars myself. And so having learned how to work on cars myself, I learned there's one immutable fact about automobiles.
They will always break down.
They will always end up in the junkyard. As we are for the graveyard, the automobile is for the junkyard, right? And you just pour money into them until they finally give up and you send them to the junkyard. So I wasn't going to spend that kind of money, right? So keep your eyes open. Opportunities present themselves, and if we're not blinded to those opportunities, we will always have something to eat. Okay? So verse 14, which is the buyer haggles over the price, saying it is worthless. Then he brags about getting a bargain. So verse 14 warns about what is said and what is actual. Right? So the buyer, if I'm haggling with you over the price of something, so you're cheating me. This is worthless. I'm not paying that money for that. And then I finally get into the price I want and I buy it.
That'd be easy because I don't have them.
And then I come over here and I tell Charlie, I said, that idiot didn't know what he had. I paid a really good price. You see what I'm saying?
I'd be speaking the truth.
Okay? So sometimes what people tell you to your face about something, you know, they go away and they say the opposite, right? And what this represents is an immoral character. And that's why I put the moral character claims he's cheated. He's being cheated, and then brags about how smart he was, what a great deal he got, you know, because of his prowess, shopping prowess. Typically, we like to do this when we go shopping for cars, don't we? Right? I always trade in used cars on used cars. One of the reasons I like to do that is because by the time I get a car ready to trade in, there's no haggling over how much that car is worth. I took a car in one time, and I told the salesman, I said, this is what I'm looking for. I said, this is my trade-in. I'm going to tell you right now, this car is worthless. You cannot sell it off your lot. The brakes are shot, the radiator's shot. This thing is toast. And he stood there and he just stared at me for a minute. And I said, is everything okay? He goes, I just never had anybody be honest with me before. And he gave me a heck of a deal. I mean, I didn't have to go and you know, haggle or anything. He just gave me a heck of a deal. And he told me, he said, I've never had somebody come in here and just be totally honest. He said, I looked at your car. He said, you're right, it's worthless. Told ya. So recognize, and that's the thing, we recognize these traits. There's a problem there, recognizing right and wrong, right? Fair, just, that kind of thing, okay? And verse, see, the next verse there, wise words are more valuable than gold and many rubies. So here a while back in verse 6, last week, we were talking about how loyal friends are hard to find, right? Remember that? It was about, you know, a loyal friend. They're very rare. So it's similar here. Verse 15 talks about how rare and valuable good advice is. I don't know why I looked at you, but I just good advice is very rare, very valuable.
Probably needed.
Okay. So if we take both of those verses together, we go back and we grab verse 15 or verse 6 and we put it to verse 15, what we learned is that one of the ways to judge a good and loyal friend is that they give you sound advice, good advice, right? Not someone who encourages trouble. I heard this phrase just the other day, right? A good friend is not one who double dog dares you to go and do something, right? This is not a good friend. Right? A good friend gives you advice, good advice. Now, I understand that the double dog dare sometimes comes out of ignorance. We don't know enough to give good advice yet. So, some dispensation is allowed there. But the good friend will not tell you what you want to hear necessarily, but neither will they encourage you to take a leap or to make a move and get into something that you're not ready for. Right? So I remember when I was studying to go take my Houston Master Electrician's exam, I was studying like crazy, man, and I had a friend of mine at work, and he kept telling me, he said he would ask me questions and I would give him answers, I coded answers and stuff. He goes, "You are ready." I'm like, "No, I'm not ready." He said, "No, you are ready." And his encouragement, and he was right. He was right. I was scared. I was ready, but I was scared. And one of the things that I learned, I took now this is an 8-hour test. Okay, so you understand that you just don't go sit down, take this test, and you're done in an hour. They give you 3 hours test. You get a break for lunch. You come back and you do 4 more hours, right? And when I took the test, I learned 2 very important things. The first thing I learned was that I was ready. There was nothing on that test that I hadn't already studied and seen. And 2 is I let the test beat me. I let all the years of having people who wouldn't study, who didn't study, tell me there's no way to pass that test. I let that beat me. When I took it the second time, skated. Right? I was ready. All right? But a good friend gives you good advice. Even if it's advice you don't necessarily believe right away, they encourage and they provide good advice. And that's what this verse is talking about. So it's easy to tell, and you can tell, if somebody's always double dog daring you, go ahead, run the light. Go ahead, run the light. And cop's not looking. Why won't this be fun? Right? Go ahead. Double dog daring you. What are you? Why did you look at him? What are you, chicken? Y'all remember Back to the Future, right? That's how you got Marty McFly to do anything, right? First you dared him, and then you asked him, "What are you, chicken?" He would do anything at that point. Don't be that person. Don't have friends like that. All right. So, moving on, verse 16 warns us to look at the character of those we lend to. I love this verse, okay? So it says, get a security from someone who guarantees a stranger's debt. Get a deposit if he does it for foreigners. Now, basically, if a person is guaranteed a stranger or a foreigner's loan and now ask us for a loan, we're supposed to get promise of collateral. Now remember, when we're dealing with other Christians, right, and we're told, what are we told in the New Testament? Right? If man wants your cloak, give him your coat. Don't take interest. Don't take a widow's land for pledge. So there's some rules here. But Proverbs is saying, look, if you got somebody that's in trouble, and that's what this verse is about. It's not just somebody who says, "Hey, I need to borrow some money." They need to borrow some money because they've made bad loans to others. Okay? And the second part of the verse there, the first part is a stranger. That's really a foreigner. And in the second part, the New Living Translation actually uses the word foreigners, but this is a little clumsy. Okay? It's a little simplistic. Oh, somebody in the office doing something?
No, it's a fan by the piano.
Oh, it's
I
a
didn't know
fan
if
by the
anyone-
piano. Okay.
Oh. I didn't know.
As long as nobody yells, it's gonna blow, we're gonna be fine. Okay. So if you go back and you look at the Hebrew word here that they're using in the verse for foreigner, it actually contains the feminine. Okay? So it's really, if you were to translate it literally, it would be strange woman. Right? And the word strange there is an inference to wild, crazy, loose, promiscuous. So if the person is in trouble because they're trying to pay for a crazy woman, we know people like this, right? You know, they hey, I need a couple of $100. I've got to get something for my wild, crazy girlfriend. We want it, you know, they're gonna get a deposit, get collateral, take possession of it. Don't just get it. Okay, how you gonna pay back? Just okay. What are you gonna give me in exchange? So I know. Give me your watch, and then I'll give you $200. Right? That's what it's talking about. We're not required to make blind loans to people who are demonstrating that they don't have any financial sense.
I'm sorry, I just had a really bad finance meeting yesterday.
So you could have used this proverb yesterday. Is that what you're saying? I can see him now, Robin, looking at all of them around the table and going, "You've been cavorting with strange women. That's why you're out of money." I had a friend, and this is exactly what he would spend all of his money clubbing, chasing after girls, young ladies, women, and then Tuesday or Wednesday, along about the week, you know, he was hurting for lunch money. Hey, can you buy my lunch? Can you buy my lunch? And so if I had known this proverb, I could save myself a little bit of money, right? Because A, a loyal friend, right, wouldn't be that way. And B, right, I don't have to loan you money because, yeah, give me your watch. I want some of this back, right? So, and that's what it's talking about. So, you know, if this person is demonstrating repeatedly bad judgment, it's okay to, you know, A, it's okay to say no, and B, it's okay to say, let me have your phone, let me have your diamond-studded watch. I had a guy, speaking of, I had a guy coming home from church Sunday. I stopped and was getting gas, and this guy pulled up, had a woman in the car. He was in the driver's seat, has an accent, says he's from Saudi Arabia, and he's got this big, huge diamond ring. And he's trying to give me this diamond ring. Do you believe in Jesus? Here, take this ring, keep it. I'm like, okay, first of all, yes, I believe in Jesus, and B, I'm not taking nothing from you. I'm sorry, I can't help you, right? So there may have been a language barrier there as well, but I was like, yeah, no. Was that you?
I'm just thinking, you finally met the uncle from Africa that was going to give us millions and millions of dollars.
But he was from Arabia. He was not from Africa. If he said he was Nigerian, I might have taken him up. Okay. All right. So verse 17. Let me reread verse 17 right quick. Stolen bread tastes sweet, but it turns to gravel in the mouth. I love that imagery, right? It's sweet, and then all of a sudden you're chewing on rocks. Okay? And so basically it's referring to anything that we've achieved by deceit or fraud. But there's an inference here. If you know Solomon, there's an inference here that it also refers to adultery. We typically do not consider adultery as theft. We consider it betrayal, especially in today's times. But it is theft. It's theft of love, theft of virtue. It is something that is stolen, right? A relationship is stolen. And so adultery can fit very neatly into this verse as an example. And it's basically just telling you, look, anything that you get by hook or by crook is not going to be a blessing in the end. It's going to turn out to be a burden. I used to tell my kids all the time, whenever they go somewhere, I said, now remember, be more blessing than burden. Right? Be more blessing than burden. Anything you get by nefarious means is going to be a burden. We never think of it that way. We always think, I'm going to get this and it's going to be great and I didn't have to pay for it. And then, we kind of have a saying for that, right? Be careful what you wish for, because it'll always turn out bad in the end. All right. Verse 18 tells us that success comes through good counsel. And it was plans succeed through good counsel. Don't go to war without wise advice. So success comes through good counsel, but war needs wise advice. Now that would, on the surface of it, right, that just seems to be the same. But there's a difference. There's a difference between good counsel and wise advice. Now good and wise are synonymous. Right? Good is wise is good. But the difference between, in the way these are phrased, is that good counsel is a one-off, right? You can come to me and say, hey, look, I'm thinking about buying a Ford Edsel, right? And I can say, let me give you some advice. Let me give you some counsel. Don't buy the Ford Edsel, okay? And you can go home and go, oh, let's see, But that's it. We're done. I've given you advice. It's a one-off. But when you go to war, right? War by definition is a long-term thing. You need more than just, hey, should I go to war? Well, sure, go ahead. They wronged you. Have at them. Drop your nukes and move on. Okay? That's a one-off. But that's not wise advice. For a war or any prolonged conflict, you need continuing input, continuing advice. Situation changes rapidly. You need more. And so what it's telling us is that, success, you may have success by getting advice. Hey, should I start a flower shop? I think you'd be great running a flower shop. You've got kind of an artistic thing. Okay, that's good. But then once you start the flower shop, if you want to continue being victorious, you need wise advice on a regular basis, right? Business advice, somebody who's coming alongside, giving you all the tips and tricks and hints. Huh?
Customer reviews.
Yeah, customer reviews. So you see what the difference is, right? Too often we try to take one and move it into the place of the other. And for those of you who are married, how long did it take you to get your marriage, I was going to say right, but how many years, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was thinking. How many years did you go hearing advice or listening or soliciting advice from parents, grandparents, other longer married couples, right? And so that's, I don't mean to liken marriage to war, but marriage, we get, when we first get married, we get a lot of advice on a continuing basis, right? Particularly, we've got somebody that we can go to. So, okay, I can't believe she said this to me. I can't believe he did this again, right? And we can go and hear, what Grandma will tell you. You never, ever consider leaving him. Divorce is not an option. Killing, on the other hand, maybe. But divorce is not an option, right? So you that's the difference between them, right? Some things require long-term input, and we have to be able to tell the difference between the two. The next verse there is quite quite simple. Verse 19 warns of gossips. So how many of y'all have heard the old adage, if they talk about others to you, they're talking about you to others? And that's what it's talking about. You know, somebody's, and Brother Shannon's kind of been hitting on that the last couple of weeks, right? Is that a refrigerator back there running? What is that?
It's
Just a
fan to cool off the piano.
Oh, it's just cooling. Okay. It's just like, that's so noisy. Okay, so anyway, if they talk about others to you, they're talking about you to others, and that's the way gossip is. Gossip has no loyalty. Gossip's going to be talking forever. One of the hardest things to do as a minister, as a pastor, as an elder, as a Christian confidant, and I guarantee you everybody in this room falls into one of those categories, okay, is confidentiality. Learning not to repeat what you're told. That's hard to do. Now, especially for pastors, teachers, because we love real life examples, right? But we got to learn to do it in such a way as not to reveal the confidential part, right? I don't want to say, now Barbie was just telling me yesterday that Travis, okay? So Travis is like, yeah, I know, she was telling me. But so you know, we break it down, we make it more generic, and we try to because what do we know? We know that we all face the same problems, even though they're embarrassing. Problems we face. You're embarrassed. Okay, let me rephrase that. I'm embarrassed by my problems. And I don't want to be called out in front of everybody, but I would like to hear some solutions. So when pastor comes up and he says from the pulpit, or he says, you know, a sermon or something, and he provides this generic promise, that's pretty close to the problem I've been having. Oh, is that the answer? Cool, right? Okay. I like this. This is quite simple. If you insult your father and mother, your light will be snuffed out early and in total darkness. I mean, wow, harsh, right? That is just harsh and true, right? So just honor your mother, father, or die.
And the promise we have in the Bible.
Yeah, and so then the final one there is an inheritance gained too early will not be too early in life will not be a blessing. It will be a burden. How many times have we seen that? Normally it's with rich people, right? They get lots of money and then they go off the deep end, right? Why? Because to be successful with wealth, we have to have something we like to call maturity. They've done studies.
You can be old and still have maturity.
Well, no, that's true. That's true. Maturity is not a guarantee by physical age.
Sure.
Right? You could be 70 years old and be just as immature as that 2-year-old. And no, I'm not talking about men. I'm talking about all people. Okay? But that's why I said it that way. It takes maturity to be able to deal with wealth. And they did a study, right, for the lottery winners, right? And what they found out is that the biggest difference between the people who were able to successfully manage sudden windfalls and those that it just utterly destroyed. Within 5 years, they were back in the poorhouse again, right? Was a level of maturity in discipline in dealing with life events, life problems. And so that's what it's telling us here, is that it's almost a guarantee. If you're too early in life, you will.
The youth is outside.
Oh, the kids are outside? Okay. Somebody let the children out. So, but if you gain too much wealth too early, right? How many of y'all? I'll date myself here just a little bit. How many of y'all know George Foreman?
Yeah.
You know who George Foreman is? So before George Foreman made hamburger grills, he was a boxer. Okay, he was a pretty good boxer. He was the Mike Tyson of his day. Only he's much bigger. Okay. Much bigger than Mike Tyson. But when he hit you, you know, it literally, you felt it until next week. He won the heavyweight championship of the world. And he became a big name. And it went to his head. That's the phrase that we use, right? It went to his head. And then, of course, he lost. And he went into a downward spiral. And if anybody remembers the kind of things he was doing, trying to regain that stature, I mean, he would do things like he went wrestled. He fought 10 different guys in the same night, trying to prove he was still. And he will tell you himself, if you've ever read his testimony, that it wasn't until he found Christ that everything turned around. And amazingly enough, at 40 some odd years of age, he got another shot at the title, which was unheard of. and they asked him, why do you think you're so successful this time? Why do you think you're handling it different this time? And that's one of the things he said. He said, maturity. He said, I finally grew up. He said, I met Jesus Christ, and he taught me how to be an adult. And so we see that. Okay. So moving on, next set of verses. You know what? I'm gonna blow everybody's mind. I'm gonna stop right there. I know we are 8 minutes early. But if I try to get through this, I will not get through all of it, and I want to try to cover this entire set. So y'all can read this, and we'll go through it next week.
George Foreman, even before he became a fighter, he was found whenever he walked out of the Harris County Jail from stealing cars.
Yeah.
And a boxing promoter just happened to be around and saw him. He was like, that is a large man. I bet he could throw a punch. Sure enough, he could.
Sure enough, he could.
Yeah.
What always impressed me, particularly in his later years, he changed his style, and he kind of came at you this way, and then when he went to punch you, came back around, and here it would come, right? And you were like, who can't see that coming? But he was so large that he was deceptively fast.
Yes.
And I watched him hit, when he connected with that haymaker, the guy would just melt. I mean, he just down he went, because it was so hard.
It was like the Mike Tyson uppercut.
Yeah.
Just
down they went.
Instantly.
So, but yeah, so maturity has a lot to do with it. And yeah, you're right. Being older as a function of the calendar, doesn't necessarily guarantee maturity. It should bring something, but not always. So, but let's stop right there, and we'll pick it up. This will just drive them nuts in the back. They'll be like, what? So, we got 5 minutes.